Eliza Harrow cleared the lichen with 2 fingers and found her own name cut into the stone. Eliza Harrow. Below it, the date said she had died 11 days earlier. She was 29 years old, breathing hard from the climb, and standing close enough to the marker for its grit to lodge beneath her nails. Beside her, Grant Calder unfolded the survey order that had brought them to the ridge. His eyes moved from the paper to the grave and then to Eliza, as though one of the 3 must be lying. "Give it back," she said. Grant had already taken her annotated claim map from the mule pack. "Until I know which record is false, I need to hold this. You know I am alive. I know a woman calling herself Eliza Harrow is alive." His words came slowly, crowded with caution. "The order bears a federal survey seal, and the burial date is carved on a stone. I am standing here." At the edge of the burial plot, Wesley Dunley tightened his packhorse's cinch without looking at them. Eliza pointed to 3 shallow cuts beneath her name, shaped like a swallow in flight. "Wesley, you know that hand." He rubbed his mouth. "Could be most anyone's cuts. You watch the mine packers mark crates that way." "I said it could be." He swung into the saddle. "Weather's coming." He rode downslope before she could put herself between him and the trail. Grant folded her map along its worn creases and placed it inside his coat. The motion hurt more than his doubt. That sheet held the valley boundary her father had walked with her, the assay paths she had carried for 3 years, and the private marks that let her read high country where official maps turned blank. Grant had traveled beside her for 2 days. He had seen her name on the courier receipts in her own hand. Yet the moment stone and paper contradicted her, he chose what could not speak. Eliza looked past him and fixed the ridge alignment in memory. Split pine, black tooth of rock, pale scar of scree. She still had her mule, food, blanket, and a route down. She did not need Grant to save her from the mountain. But he now carried the only marked connection between the false grave, her valley, and the survey that might erase both. "You go first," she said. "I want to see what your paper tells you to step on." If you want to hear how she makes the living matter more than the stone, subscribe, and stay on this ridge with her. Grant studied her face, perhaps expecting fear or pleading. Eliza gave him neither. He turned toward the shelf trail and she followed because he held leverage that belonged to her. That was not trust, it was strategy. The marked trail narrowed around a wall of red stone. Grant consulted the survey order, where a neat black line promised solid footing around the bend. Eliza watched the ground instead. 3 stones had been stacked at the outer edge. They looked old from above, but their undersides were damp and clean. Someone had reset them that morning. "Stop." Grant lifted one boot. "The route is marked." "Back." The short command struck him harder than an explanation. He shifted his weight uphill. Eliza cut a dead branch from the brush with her belt knife, braced herself against the wall, and pushed the branch into the dirt beyond the cairn. The shelf broke away without warning. Stones and rotten soil rattled down the ravine until the sound thinned into distance. Grant stared at the empty place where his next step would have landed. "Recently undercut," he said, recovering the measured voice he used when facts embarrassed him. "Possibly water beneath the—" "Someone reset the cairn." He looked at the clean undersides. "Yes." "Say the rest." "Someone wanted the marked trail used." Eliza found a narrow rise through juniper 30 feet uphill. It was ugly, steep, and sound. "Mule behind me. Keep your weight toward the wall." Grant obeyed. On the worst pitch, loose gravel slid beneath Eliza's boot. He offered his hand. She caught a juniper root instead and pulled herself level. His hand remained open for a breath before he lowered it. There was no offense in his face, only the first unwilling gleam of admiration. He had believed the supposed imposter might misread a claim. She had just kept him from vanishing over a shelf because she read disturbed dirt better than he read ink. At the top of the rise, he took out her map. Eliza held out her palm. Grant examined the sheet, then the broken trail below. The alteration might be related to the survey. That is why you took it. He did not return it. That is why I cannot yet. Whatever admiration had passed between them closed like a fist. Eliza turned downhill. Then keep up. The mine camp appeared late in the afternoon, pinned between a black slope and a creek stained orange by tailings. Ore carts moved along the upper track. Below them stood a store, a long bunkhouse, and an office with glass windows too clean for the rest of the camp. Orson Fenwick came out before they reached the hitch rail. He wore a dark coat without dust on the shoulders and smiled as though he had been waiting to settle an account. "Mr. Calder, you found our unfortunate complication." Eliza dismounted. "My name is not a complication." "Names are accounts, miss. Well, that is precisely the difficulty." Fenwick accepted Grant's survey order and glanced at the seal. "A lawful notice records Eliza Harrow dead. This woman's claim, therefore, cannot proceed to hearing." He produced a printed death notice and laid it on the office counter. Then he opened a narrow book containing Eliza's courier deliveries. 3 months of entries stood in her handwriting. Fenwick drew a line through everyone. "Those runs fed this camp," Eliza said. The deliveries were credited to Eliza Harrow. If she is deceased, an unknown carrier presented them under a false name. "You ate the flour, you smelted the assays. Goods received do not establish identity." His tone stayed mild. "The account belongs to the name on the notice, not the woman using it." He canceled her courier credit with one stamp. A second mark postponed the Valley hearing that would have confirmed her right to sell or keep the land. A third declared her past wages disputed. Grant's survey seal lay beside his hand, making each act appear orderly. Wesley stood by the store door. When Eliza looked at him, he studied a crack in the floor. Grant's face changed as Fenwick crossed through delivery after delivery. He had expected a question. Instead, his caution had become a weapon in another man's hand. Fenwick pushed a statement toward Eliza. "There is a simple accommodation. Sign that the woman buried above the ridge was Eliza Harrow and that you used her name for convenience. I can establish new courier credit under whatever name you choose. You want me to purchase supper with my own disappearance. I want to regularize the account." Eliza read the first line, then pushed the paper back. "No. Without credit, you cannot buy from the company store. My mule carries food. The main road crosses company ground. Mountains have more than one way down." Fenwick's smile thinned. "Not before the cold rain." Eliza went outside. The loss was already real. Her earned wages were gone, her Valley hearing canceled, and every delivery she had made recast as fraud. She could still leave. What she could not do was leave unchanged. She led her mule to the public trough and found a company chain looped through its handle. A store clerk watched from behind the window while rain darkened the animal's neck. "Water is charged to active accounts," he called. Eliza took the small canvas bucket from her own kit and walked past the trough to the creek. The water there ran cold and carried a rusty color from the upper slope. She went farther upstream until it cleared, filled the bucket, and brought it back to the mule. Grant stood under the porch roof. He looked from the chain trough to the ledger visible through the office glass. "Fenwick did that after you refused," he said. "Yes. I can pay cash." "Then he learns he can deny me and collect from you." Eliza held the bucket while the mule drank. "Do not purchase comfort for me while your seal purchases harm." The clerk closed the window. Grant stepped into the rain. "What can I do now?" "Watch, remember, decide what your work serves." She carried a second bucket from the clear reach. The walk was longer than accepting his coin, but it kept the choice hers. Grant said nothing more. He took neither bucket from her. Instead, he unhitched his own horse and walked it upstream, accepting the same inconvenience rather than buying an exception. Eliza noticed. She did not reward him for it, but she noticed. Grant followed her past the store. He removed her map from his coat and held it out. Eliza did not take it at once. Why now? Because I used authority I had not earned, and Fenwick used mine to injure you. His sentences still carried their careful joints, but shame had entered them. Keeping this cannot correct that. Fenwick appeared in the doorway with a travel order. Mr. Calder, the condemned line must be marked before dusk tomorrow. Your seal here. Grant took the order, tore the waxed seal bearing his mark from its bottom, and dropped the fragments on the porch. My survey will not certify a line I have not walked. The color around Fenwick's mouth went pale. Grant had contradicted the man paying him, in front of Eliza and anyone near enough to hear. Eliza accepted her map and checked every fold. Nothing was missing. She slid it beneath her coat. That returns paper, she said, not trust. I understand. No, you understand the sentence. The rest will cost you. Cold drops struck the porch roof. On the map, the company road was the only safe descent drawn below the mine. Fenwick controlled it. The older side paths crossed steep country that rain could turn treacherous overnight. Grant glanced toward the darkening ridge. If you mean to leave now, the western spur may still be passable, although I cannot be certain after. I know what you cannot be certain of. She walked toward the bunkhouse, where 40 adult men were finishing a shift with gray faces and empty lunch tins. Grant came after her, not leading and not offering terms. Thaddeus Prescott, the foreman, sat on an upturned ore bucket with a stack of blank pay envelopes on his knee. He was broad through the shoulders and old enough for iron gray to show in his beard. Who pays for tomorrow's food? He asked Grant without greeting. Grant looked at Fenwick's store. The company says the accounts are delayed. I asked who pays. No one has. Then say that first. Thaddeus handed Eliza an envelope. It contained a ration token and no money. Around them, men tipped empty tins over a barrel and waited while the cook counted beans. Eliza examined the envelopes. Each showed a different deduction: boots, powder, lamp oil, medicine, so every worker believed his own shortage was private. How many know the others are unpaid? She asked. Now 3, Thaddeus said. Yesterday 1. Carts still move. Fenwick says output protects the contract. Contract protects wages. Wages always arrive after the next cart. Grant found 2 torn account scraps near the desk. The figures showed enough in plain terms. Fenwick kept each debt separate while the mine's backer paid for full output. The papers explained the trick, but the empty tins explained the harm. Why not stop? Grant asked. Thaddeus looked toward the steep road. 40 men, 1 guarded descent, cold rain, no cash beyond company scrip. Which pair goes first and who feeds the last? That blunt question silenced Grant. A bell sounded from the upper track, and 6 men rose at once despite the blank envelopes. They moved toward a stalled ore cart because failure to clear it would be entered against their individual accounts. Thaddeus remained seated. See the trick? He asked Eliza. Every man thinks the next man may earn enough to leave first. And every shortage looks like his private failure, she said. Who tells 40 ashamed men they were cheated the same way? Eliza watched the workers strain against the cart. Fenwick did not need armed men at every shoulder. He needed each worker to believe isolation was safer than comparison. She collected 4 blank envelopes and laid them side by side. The deductions differed, but the missing pay was identical. Do not call a meeting, she said. He can frighten a room. Ask 2 men at a time what is in the envelope. Let them answer each other. Thaddeus scratched his beard. Pairs. Pairs can compare without performing courage for a crowd. Grant looked toward the office. Fenwick will notice. Then he notices after the men do. Thaddeus gave Eliza a sharp nod. It was not trust yet. It was recognition that she understood how a root could be made from people as surely as from stone. Eliza spread her map on the bucket. A worker leaning close touched the 3 swallow cuts in its margin. Old Amos Vale used that mark, he said. Ventilation foreman, been gone near a year. Thaddeus's eyes sharpened. Fenwick said Vale died in a cave-in. Where is he buried? Eliza asked. No one answered. For the first time, the false stone above the ridge looked like more than an attack on her valley. Fenwick had learned that a grave ended questions. If a troublesome name could be placed beneath stone, its work, wages, and warnings could be claimed by whoever remained. The next morning, the rain eased to a cold mist. In a storage cut behind the bunkhouse, Eliza noticed a loose thread pulled steadily toward a crack between boarded timbers. She held it up. Air moves inward. Grant crouched at a respectful distance. An older passage may continue beyond the boards, though its condition cannot be assumed. Write the direction. He opened his field book, then stopped. Instead of marking it himself, he passed her the pencil and set the book on a crate between them. Eliza drew 1 arrow. Their hands came near as he steadied the page, but he moved his fingers before they touched. The restraint was deliberate. He had noticed the tremor in her hands outside the store and had chosen not to turn concern into a claim. There, she said. Grant studied her mark. Your observation changes the lower line. My observation saved your life yesterday. Yes, he met her eyes. It did. The direct admission warmed nothing she was ready to name, yet she heard its difference. He no longer hid the truth inside a qualification. Eliza pulled 1 rotten board aside far enough to see the inner rock. 3 shallow cuts formed a swallow. She replaced the board. Vale marked this. From the yard came the scrape of another loaded cart. Eliza pressed the loose thread between finger and thumb. The cool pull did not promise safety. It promised connection, away from one side of the slope to another that Fenwick's clean road map omitted. Vale would not mark a useless crack 3 times, she said. Grant opened his field book again but did not reach for the pencil. What would you mark next? She drew a short line toward the far slope, stopping before it reached daylight. Only what I know. And the rest? Walk it or leave it blank. The rule was meant for the map, but Grant heard the judgment inside it. His earlier work had filled blank country with conclusions because uncertainty threatened his standing. Eliza would rather show an unfinished line than make a finished lie. I was taught a survey was valuable because it ended dispute, he said. A false ending only hides who pays. He looked at her with a steadiness that carried more than professional respect. Eliza felt it and turned back to the boards before tenderness could make the day simpler than it was. Attraction did not erase what he had done. It made accountability more necessary. If the cut reaches the far slope, it may explain why Fenwick wants my stakes moved. May, she handed back the pencil, you still like that word. It has kept me from false certainty. Not on the ridge. Grant closed the book. He had no answer. They followed the swallow marks above camp after noon. The cuts were not a complete path. They appeared where a careful man would look, beneath a ledge on the back of a boundary post, low on a stone protected from snow. Near a stand of wind-bent spruce, Eliza found another grave marker. Amos Vale, it read. The death date was 9 months earlier. No body showed, no earth had recently been turned. The marker itself was the warning. Vale's root marks continued beyond it toward the boarded side cut. Grant ran his thumb above the carved swallow without touching it. Your stone was made in the same hand. Wesley knew. He feared losing the road. Fear explains a silence, it does not repair one. Orson Fenwick stepped from behind the spruce with a guard 20 paces back. He carried a folded statement and spoke as if arriving for an appointment. Miss Harrow, I hoped further reflection might lead us to a useful settlement. He offered the paper. It restored her courier credit and recognized her valley claim. In return, she was to certify that Amos Vale had died in a cave-in and that his marks indicated unsafe workings, not a root. For one hard second, Eliza saw everything the signature could restore. The hearing, the wages, her name spoken without a smirk. Fenwick had found the exact shape of her hunger and priced it. You buried him on paper, she said. Mr. Vale abandoned his duties. The form protects working men from following obsolete marks. Then why do you need a dead woman to sign it? Fenwick's smile did not move. Because the account is easiest closed by the person most interested in reopening hers. Eliza tore the statement once from top to bottom. She let the halves fall at his boots. Fenwick turned to Grant. The condemnation stakes will be moved at dusk. Your contract requires the old cut to be labeled unsafe. My contract required an honest survey. Your contract required usable conclusions. Fenwick looked back at Eliza. Cold rain returns tonight. By tomorrow, the company road will be the only practical passage. Consider whose name opens it. He walked away, leaving the torn promise in the wet needles. Eliza knelt beside Vale's marker. The second grave changed the question. Fenwick had not invented one false death to steal one valley. He had built a habit of making inconvenient people absent. Vale had answered by leaving cuts that survived him. Those cuts might lead out. Eliza followed the marks another 100 yards until the slope steepened. One cut faced backward, visible only to someone descending. Another sat low beside a patch of pale stone. Vale had not marked a treasure or a claim. He had marked decisions. Turn here, avoid there, look behind you before the land closes. Grant stayed where she directed and called the distance in measured paces. When the marks ended at a scree field, Eliza did not guess. She crouched, felt cool air between two rocks and stopped. Outlet, Grant said. Possible outlet. He almost smiled. You like that word when it is honest. I like limits stated before someone steps on them. Below, Fenwick's men began moving condemnation stakes. Their mallets carried across the slope. Each blow declared the old route closed without anyone testing it. Eliza looked back toward the second marker. Vale's warning had survived because Fenwick mistook marks for proof and proof for control. The cuts were useful only when a living person read them, tested them, and chose what risk to bear. We go back, she said, before he sees what we found. Grant folded no paper and issued no objection. He followed her exact path down. That evening, rain hammered the ore-shed roof. Eliza laid Grant's copied coordinates across an empty crate and made him return them one by one. With each sheet, she compared his marks to hers, then sliced away the false survey ribbon Fenwick had tied around the condemned line. Say why, she told him. Grant stood on the other side of the crate, soaked at the shoulders. I believed the order because it carried seals I recognized. That is what you did, say why. He picked up another coordinate sheet and set it before her. 3 years ago, I approved a boundary line too quickly. A spring flood exposed the error. 2 families lost a season arguing over land because I had been certain. Eliza cut the ribbon into shorter pieces, so you became careful. I became afraid. Of being wrong. Of being seen wrong again. His voice lost its measured shelter. A grave could not accuse my work. A living claimant could. The stone felt safer to believe than you. The plain admission struck deeper than an excuse. Grant had not doubted her because the evidence was strong. He had doubted her because she could answer back. Eliza swept the ribbon pieces into her palm. Her anger had been held so tightly that her fingers hurt. "When you took that map, I was standing beside my own grave," she said. "I told you my name. You put more faith in a date cut by a stranger." "I did." It felt like being buried while I stood there. Her voice broke on the final word, and that made her angrier. She struck the crate with the flat of her hand. "Do not look away now." Grant did not. Shame showed in his face, but he did not ask her to soften the truth for him. "I am sorry," he said. "Sorry is not a root." "No." "Sorry does not restore my wages." "No." "And it does not earn forgiveness." "No." He pushed the last copied coordinate across the crate. "Tell me what cooperation costs." Eliza breathed until her hand stopped shaking. Wanting him to be better was not the same as trusting him. The difference mattered. "If my life depends on a line no office filed, will you follow it?" "Yes." "No condition, no careful clause." She gathered her map and the returned sheets. "Then you may help. I have not forgiven you." "I understand." This time, she believed he understood more than the sentence. If earned trust matters more to you than easy rescue, subscribe before Eliza chooses her route. Before dawn, Eliza sat with Thaddeus in the dark bunkhouse and divided the workers into pairs. She matched a strong man with one whose ankle had never healed straight, a calm man with one afraid of enclosed places, and each experienced lamp carrier with someone who had worked only the open cut. All were adults. All had to choose for themselves. Thaddeus watched her marks. Who moves first? The slowest pair. Who waits last? You and me. What happens if the far outlet is blocked? We return before the second lamp mark. No one presses forward blind. He leaned back. What happens to wages? Fenwick keeps what he already withholds. Food. Each pair carries 1 day from what remains. Beyond the outlet, pairs split toward separate trailheads. No single camp to corner. Thaddeus studied her for a long moment. That answer costs something, better than a promise. Will you join? He looked at the blank envelope stacked near his bunk. By leaving, he risked every dollar Fenwick owed him and the authority he held as foreman. I join if the first test is sound, he said. And if a man says no, you let him stay. Yes. Eliza could have left with Grant by the western spur while the rain held. The path remained dangerous but possible for two. She looked down the bunk line at men sleeping in work clothes because Fenwick could ring for them before light. We do not leave alone, she said. That choice changed the room. Thaddeus began waking men in pairs, not as a crowd that could be frightened all at once. Near the back door, Wesley waited with a packet of damp letters. Vale gave me these before he left. Left? Eliza asked. Wesley glanced toward the office. He was alive when he reached the North Trail. Said the cuts would show a way if Fenwick closed the road. I kept quiet because my pack contract is all I have. You watched my name go into stone. I did not carve it. You let the lie stand. His answer came in pieces. I thought only until the survey passed. I thought no one would. A guard's lantern crossed the yard. Its light caught the letters in Wesley's hand. Wesley thrust them toward Eliza. Take them. She did, but not because papers would save them. Vale's short notes confirmed only what the mountain had already said. The old cut reached air on the far slope. The workers still had to choose, and Eliza still had to lead. By breakfast, Fenwick had moved first. He nailed Eliza's torn statement to the store wall beneath a notice calling her unstable and dangerous. He claimed she had destroyed an offer meant to correct her account. Several workers who had agreed in darkness now stepped away from her in daylight. Fenwick stood on the office porch. For everyone's protection, tomorrow's shift begins before dawn. All hands will report underground. Absence will forfeit accumulated wages and rations. The compulsory shift would scatter the men through separate workings before they could reach the old cut. 2 guards entered Grant's quarters and carried out his tripod, compass, field case, and level. Fenwick accepted each instrument as though balancing a ledger. "Company property pending review," he said. "Those instruments are mine," Grant answered. "Purchased through advances against your contract. Ownership is simply the final state of an account." Wesley pushed through the workers gathered near the wall. His face had gone gray, but his words finally arrived whole. "Eliza Harrow did not carve either marker. I know the hand. A company packer named Lusk cut them from Fenwick's slips. Amos Vale was alive when he left." Fenwick did not raise his voice. "Mr. Dunley has chosen to terminate his pack agreement. His animals and road access are therefore subject to settlement." Wesley flinched as a guard took the brass contract tag from his saddle rack. The cost was immediate. He had spoken too late to be brave without consequence, but he had spoken before it was safe. Some workers looked from Wesley to Eliza, others kept their distance. Thaddeus lifted one empty pay envelope. "Why does Fenwick need a dead woman's signature if she means nothing?" No one answered him. Eliza did not argue that she was Eliza. Debate would keep them under Fenwick's porch while the hours vanished. She returned to the pair list. "First pair moves tonight," she said. "Anyone staying reports to Thaddeus now. Choose with the cost in front of you." The workers began crossing the yard 1 and 2 at a time. Fenwick's notice stayed on the wall. It did not stop their feet. All afternoon, Eliza met pairs in places Fenwick could not turn into a spectacle. Behind the cookhouse, beside the mule line, near the creek where water covered low voices. She made no promise of wages at the other end. She told each man the same plain facts. The old cut might reach the far slope. The company road would be guarded. Anyone who entered must accept the chance of turning back, and anyone who stayed would not be shamed. One pair refused. A broad miner named Silas said his breathing failed in narrow places, and his partner would not leave without him. "Then take the creek trail before dark," Eliza said. "It is longer but open. Fenwick's rider watches it. Wait until Grant draws him south. Leave your company coat here so he looks for the wrong color." Silas searched her face. "You do not need us in your line. I need you to choose a route you can finish." The men left their coats in the bunkhouse and prepared for the creek. Eliza revised the list. Leadership was not forcing everyone through her answer. It was keeping Fenwick from owning the alternatives. Thaddeus brought her a heel of bread and half an apple. "You have eaten." "Not since morning." "Then who leads if you fall over?" Eliza took the food. Thaddeus's care sounded like a consequence question because that was the language he trusted. Across the yard, Grant was repairing a broken cinch for Wesley's spare pack horse. His hands worked without flourish. When he saw Eliza eating, relief briefly softened his face. He did not come over. For once, he allowed concern to remain concern without making it authority. At dusk, Eliza reached the boarded side cut with Thaddeus and listened to the timber. She felt the pull of cool air with a loose thread, checked the first stretch, and returned before the agreed lamp mark. No lecture could make the route safe. Only a careful test could show whether it was usable that night. "Sound enough for pairs," she told Thaddeus. "No rushing, weakest first." Grant waited beyond the boards. Without his instruments, he seemed strangely unarmored. "Fenwick has a guard above the outlet," he said. "I saw the lamp." Eliza adjusted the pair order, moving the man with the injured ankle to the front so he would have the most time. Take a false line toward the company road, she told Grant. Let Fenwick see you. If he follows me, you will enter without anyone at the rear who knows the survey. Thaddeus knows the men. I know the route. Grant looked at the black opening, then at her. Fear stripped the last qualifications from his voice. I may not reach you again. Eliza wanted to tell him that he would. She wanted, against her judgment, to touch the wet sleeve at his wrist. Instead, she gave him what the night required. Carry the false line south. Break the first stake where he can hear it, then turn west. He nodded. Say it back. South, break the first stake, turn west. Go. Grant obeyed. That obedience was not weakness. It was the first time he trusted her direction while every visible authority pointed elsewhere. Minutes later, wood snapped on the company road. A guard's lamp moved away from the outlet. Eliza pulled the first board free. The old air road was narrow, timbered in places and open stone in others. Eliza tested the moving air, then sent the first pair through. Lamp glow receded around the bend. A second pair followed at the counted interval, then a third. No one spoke above a murmur. Fear passed backward through the line whenever loose grit fell, but Eliza kept the instructions simple. Hold spacing, watch the boots ahead, keep moving. Outside, Grant carried 2 broken survey stakes down the company road. Fenwick intercepted him near the ore track. You are assisting theft of contracted labor, Fenwick said. Men are not output. A pleasing sentiment from someone whose errors already cost families land. Fenwick held out his hand. Give me the field case, and I may describe tonight as professional confusion. Grant dropped the empty case into the mud. No. Fenwick's guard moved toward the old outlet, guessing the deception. Grant stepped across the track to delay him. On the wet slope, Grant lost his footing and fell hard against the lower bank. There was no blood, only a stunned breath and the crack of his compass case beneath Fenwick's boot. Your contract is ended, Fenwick said. Your instruments remain against damages. Your standing will not survive my report. Grant pushed himself upright, then righted. He had given up the last shield of his profession to buy Eliza minutes. Inside the passage, those minutes mattered. One man froze at a low brace and blocked the pair behind him. Eliza returned against the flow, took his lamp before his shaking hand dropped it, and spoke close enough for him to hear. Look at my boots, one step, now another. He followed the exact nouns and short commands until the roof rose again. The line moved. At the far end, pale night showed through scree. Eliza cleared only enough loose stone to make a passage, then guided the first pair onto the slope. The guard's lamp was gone, drawn toward Grant's false line. Pair after pair emerged and turned toward separate trails as planned. No cheering gathered them into a crowd. Their leaving was quiet, practical, and harder for Fenwick to stop. At the 7th pair, a timber gave a low complaint behind Eliza. Dust sifted from above. She raised one hand and the line stopped without bunching. Back 3 steps, she ordered. Thaddeus relayed the words, blunt and calm. Eliza listened. The sound did not repeat. She moved the next pair along the inner wall and shortened the interval so no one waited beneath the strained brace. The hurt miner stumbled before the outlet. Thaddeus tried to lift him alone. No, Eliza said. Arm over my shoulder, weight between us. You need to clear the mouth, Thaddeus answered. The mouth is clear, he is not. They moved together. The miner apologized through clenched teeth. Save breath, Eliza told him. Step on 3. She counted. The simple rhythm carried them over loose stone. Behind them, the last lamp came closer, proof not of a document but of every adult who had chosen to keep moving. When night air finally reached the hurt man's face, he laughed once in disbelief. Eliza felt the same wild relief, but she did not stop. Fenwick was climbing toward them, and safety still depended on distance. Thaddeus came last with a miner whose knee had been hurt in the descent. Together they supported him between them. As they reached open ground, Fenwick climbed from the road below. "Prescott," he called, "take those men back. Every dollar owed is forfeit." Thaddeus lowered the hurt man onto a flat stone. From his pocket, he removed a fistful of company scrip. He dropped it into an empty ore cart beside the outlet. "Who spends it when your store is behind us?" he asked. Fenwick turned to Eliza. "You have led them into unemployment and exposure. The road is mine. The contract is mine. By morning, hunger will return them." Eliza looked along the slope. The adults were already moving in pairs toward 3 different trailheads, carrying shared food and their own choices. Fenwick could command the road. He could not command every path in the mountain. "Keep walking," she called. They did. Grant appeared below, limping, without his field case. Fenwick ordered the guard beside him to block the nearest pair. The guard removed his company badge, set it on the cart, and went to help the hurt miner stand. That was the moment Fenwick's power broke. No paper declared it. No crowd voted. The people he had kept separate simply stopped obeying. Eliza took the hurt miner's other arm. She led the final pair away while Fenwick stood beside a cart holding worthless scrip and 2 abandoned badges. He lost because the woman he had named dead led every miner out by a route he could not control. Morning found the ore carts empty. The ration cage remained locked, but no one queued before it. The bunkhouse doors stood open along a vacant line. 2 former guards carried packs toward separate trailheads, helping men who had once feared them. Fenwick spent the first hour sending orders down a road nobody used. Near noon, a courier from the mine's eastern backer arrived to collect the output tally. He found no output, no loading crew, and no foreman. Fenwick met him at the office with his coat buttoned and his voice still polished. "A temporary labor disturbance," he said, "incited by an identity claimant and a compromised surveyor." The courier looked at the stopped carts. "Can you fill the contracted shipment?" "Once road access and ration privileges are applied, the men will return." From the yard, Thaddeus called, "Which men?" Only a few adults remained long enough to collect personal gear. They did not gather around Fenwick. They passed through the camp and kept going. Fenwick raised his voice at last. "Any worker leaving will be blacklisted from every operation financed by this office." Grant stood beside Eliza, one hand braced against the porch rail. "My name is on surveys for 3 of those operations," he told the courier. "It will not be after today. Fenwick's threat depends on standing he cannot keep once output stops." The courier examined Grant's empty belt, where his compass case had hung. "You surrender your contract with that statement." "I surrendered it last night." The courier canceled Fenwick's output agreement in his presence. The act recorded a loss already made by worker behavior. It did not restore Eliza's name or pronounce her honest. She needed no such blessing from him. Fenwick caught the canceled sheet before it fell from the courier's hand. For the first time, his polished language failed him. "The equipment, the road, the claims, those remain company assets." "Assets without labor do not meet Friday's shipment," the courier said. "The men are indebted." Thaddeus came down the porch steps with his bedroll over one shoulder. "To whom?" Fenwick pointed toward the abandoned store. "Every ration was advanced." "Against wages you did not pay." "The accounts require reconciliation." "Who stays to reconcile them?" Thaddeus walked away before Fenwick could answer. That was his final consequence question, and the empty yard answered it. Wesley led his horses past the office. He no longer had the brass tag that permitted him on the company road, so he turned them toward a rougher trail. When he reached Eliza, he stopped. "I should have spoken on the ridge." Yes. Losing the contract does not settle it. No. He nodded, accepting that costly truth offered no quick forgiveness. If you ever need a packer west of here, I will give you the route before I give you an excuse. Do that for the next person, whether I am there or not. Wesley led the horses on. Fenwick's final account was simple enough for anyone to hear. No labor, no ore, no contract, and no guard willing to enforce his road. Eliza folded her map at the hitch rail. Grant watched her, waiting without presuming he still had a place in her plans. "What will you do with the valley?" he asked. "After everything done to keep it from you, I assumed you would hold it." Eliza looked west, where separate pairs were already becoming small figures on separate trails. "Choose," she said. He frowned. "Choose what?" "That is what land should let a person do. Keep it, sell it, leave it, not spend a life proving a grave wrong." Grant nodded. He did not ask what she would choose for him. Weeks later, Eliza sold the grazing valley to 3 independent families who had pooled their savings. She named the price, kept the water access open among them, and signed Eliza Harrow in a living hand. The signature did not make her real. It showed that she had decided what to do with what was hers. She used part of the money to repay the workers for supplies lost during the Exodus. She bought westbound passage with the rest and left the high country before the first deep snow. Grant did not follow. He spent the next months correcting the old boundary error he had once hidden behind caution. He worked without Fenwick's contract, sold his spare equipment, and wrote plain statements to the families his mistake had harmed. Eliza heard of it through Wesley, who rebuilt his packwork on smaller trails and never again treated silence as harmless. The separation mattered. Grant's sacrifice could not be one dramatic night followed by an easy reward. Eliza traveled because freedom had been the point. In spring, at a mountain coach stop far west of the mine, she was checking a route board when a coach rolled in. Grant stepped down carrying one canvas bag. No survey case hung at his side. No company seal shone on his coat. He stopped several paces away. "I heard your next road crosses the Bitterroot country," he said. "It might. Does it have room for a man who follows directions?" Eliza studied him. His face was leaner. The careful clauses had not vanished, but he no longer used them to hide. "What did you surrender?" she asked. "Fenwick's contract, my standing with his backers, the instruments claimed against it, 6 months correcting the boundary I was afraid to face." "And what do you expect for that?" "Nothing owed." He drew a breath. "I hope for permission to walk the next leg. If the answer is no, I will take the south coach." Eliza wanted him. She could admit that now without mistaking desire for debt. He had not arrived to restore her name, grant her safety, or offer a home. He had come without the authority that once mattered more to him than her living voice. She pointed toward the North Trail. "That way, keep left at the split pine." Grant looked where she pointed, then back at her. "Am I walking alone?" Eliza lifted her pack. "Not this leg." Relief crossed his face, quiet and unguarded. He waited until she took the first step. Subscribe for the next Frontier story, where love must earn its place. At the edge of the station yard, the road divided. Eliza gave the next direction, and Grant turned where she pointed.